Good afternoon. I want to call this community services special session meeting to order. And Mr. Snell, would you give the invitation?
Sure. All rise, please. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you, Lord, for this day. Spring is upon us, and it's time of the year to have new things to happen. And I hope, Lord, and pray that we have new things happen in the Cherokee Nation and through our state and federal government. Lord, just be with us as we go through this meeting. Guide us, direct us, give us a good way to lead our people, Lord. Thank you. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Kelly, would you call the roll, please?
Harley Buzzard.
Here.
Chris Stokes.
Here.
Bill England. Bill John Baker.
Here.
Jack Baker.
Here.
Julia Coates. Bradley Cobb.
Bonnie.
Joe Crittenden. Jody Fishinghawk. Here. Meredith Fraley. Janelle Fulbright. Here. Don Garvin. Tana Gloria Jordan. Present. Curtis Snell.
Here.
David Thornton. Karen Helen Watts.
Thank you. I want to thank all the members of this committee who come out a little bit early today for our 1 o'clock special session. As you all know, the stimulus package has been coming out of Congress, and this is one of the things that we want to discuss today over the halls of funding. So I'm going to read the resolution, then I'm going to ask Marvin Jones to come up to the podium there and give us an overview. And I think when we get through with this, hopefully we can send it to full council tonight if we get that motion. So it's a resolution approving and authorizing the submission of the amended fiscal year 2008 Indian Housing Plan to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. And Marvin, I'm going to ask you to come forward and give us an overview of what we're doing here and see if we've got any questions for you.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. I've handed out a copy of the provision of the law. It'll say HR 1-101 on top of it. And this is a copy of the actual law, the so-called stimulus law that provides for the money for NAHASDA. At the bottom you'll see Native American Housing Block Grant. And I want to go through that with you briefly to let you know the kind of the parameters of what we can use the money for. Second page, it divides the money up into two different components. What is called the formula amount, which is it'll run the normal NAHASDA formula and we get an amount for that. And then it'll talk about a competitive portion, which has not been issued yet, but which will be eligible for a little bit later. The $255 million that's to be through the formula, you can see on like about the 7th or 8th sentence down, it'll tell us what we can use the money for. It says for new construction, acquisition, rehabilitation, including energy efficiency and conservation and infrastructure. So it limits our funding to those items. NAHASDA includes a whole bunch of other things that we put into our Indian housing plan, such as law enforcement, resident services, all kinds of other kinds of activities. But the stimulus funding is limited to those activities right there. So that's kind of the parameter of what we can expend the money for. If you go down a little bit further to the middle of the page, there it talks about the time frame as to when we have to have the funds obligated and expended. If you go back up, I forgot, there's another provision that's really important in the consideration of the stimulus formula money. It says that in selecting projects to be funded, and this is about, the 8th or 9th sentence down, that in selecting projects to be funded, recipients shall give priority to projects for which contracts can be awarded within 180 days. 180 days pretty much coincides with the end of this fiscal year, September 30th of 2009. So that's the other parameter we were looking at. What kind of projects do we have that can fit into that time frame? Not all the instructions on what we need to do in order to get the funds as far as Indian housing plan requirements and those things have been issued yet. What we do know is that HUD wants the funds, we want the 2008 Indian housing plan amended to include the stimulus funds. In addition, the stimulus funds, even though they're part of the 2008 Indian housing plan, have to be accounted for and have to be kept separate and apart from the regular NAHASTA funds. So we'll basically have two different tracking systems. This particular money we're going to talk about, even though it's included in the 2008 Indian housing plan, it has to be kept separate and tracked separate and apart from the regular fund. What you'll also see is after we consider this plan, if in fact this is what you agreed to do, you'll see corresponding 3 budgets in the E&F at 2 o'clock in the special committee that basically implements this particular Indian housing plan. If we make changes in the Indian housing plan and redirect funds from one place to the other, then those budgets for E&F have to be changed, obviously, because they're in conformance with this proposed Indian housing plan. Okay, if I could now, this is a real simple Indian housing plan change. The pages that you have in your book will show the resolution, and then it'll have the pages, only the pages that are changing in the 2008 Indian housing plan. What we tried to do in the plan pages will be to bolden them when we can. There's 2 or 3 pages where it doesn't allow us to bolden the type, but if you look on, it'll say page 7 of the 1-year Indian housing plan. If you look at that page, and if you see the bold type under 1A, 2B, and then down at the bottom of page 2D where it's bolden, those,
Chair recognizes Councilor Jordan.
Marvin, since we've started this project on improving the infrastructure of the additions that are already existing, would it be possible to take some of this money and finish up that list? Because the first part of the list, the county commissioners have already reported back what the cost is, and they pretty well encumbered the $500,000. And I was under the impression that when we got some more money that we were going to try to do the other half of the list. And that could be done quickly, probably within the next 180 days. Would that be a possibility that we take a little bit of that money and finish up 1E's objectives?
It's not just a possibility, it's the intent. It's written in here that, yeah, we are going to do that.
So are we going to add some money to the 1E goals and objectives for a 1-year Indian housing plan?
Actually, we included it in 1A.
1A,
if you see up in the parentheses.
20 LR/MH.
Yeah,
project.
and you see the roads there. I
Okay.
specifically included that in there. We didn't want to, had the choice of trying to separate exactly how much money and putting it down in 1E or just lump summing it up in 1A, and just chose to lump sum it up in 1A.
So if we pass this, then we can go ahead and encourage our commissioners to work with, I guess, Mr. Sutherland on getting the other half of that list done?
That's correct.
Okay.
And without misstating, I know that at one time there was at least $250,000 of the increase here intended for roads. but, that's above the 500,000 already.
Okay, so there may be another 250,000 already built in.
Yeah, there is for sure, and I don't know if that's where we ended up on the roads, 250,000 for the mutual help roads.
I think we got
Half million.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we have the 500,000 under 1E,
Yeah, that's-
and I wonder,
Yeah.
were you talking about another 250,000?
Yeah, and the stimulus money. Yeah,
Okay.
an additional 500,000, David thinks. We were talking an additional 250,000, or 500,000.
Okay, so if we pass this today, we have the 500,000 already that we're working on. And under 1A, there's another 500,000 to finish up that project.
That's correct.
Okay.
And this money should be available, probably the end of the month or thereabouts. And if we get it budgeted, of course, from E&F this afternoon, that budget gets in there, and then all we would be waiting for is a grant agreement with HUD, and HUD's required by the law to obligate the money here in the next few days. So this money, in effect, will be about that other, 500,000 will be available here just probably by April 1 or right around then. And I did neglect to say how much the amount of money that we're talking about. It's $11,878,385. That's from the formula only. We're not talking about the competitive piece. That's the Cherokee Nation amount, $11,878,385. Of that, the Delaware portion is $213,741. Now, what we did was we estimated a little bit of investment income, program income, and so we're working with $11,900,000, which you'll see in the actual Indian Housing Plan, and you'll see that in the 3 budgets that go to E&F. So the amounts will end up being $215,000 for the Delawares, and then the balance of it will be Cherokee Nation included in the modernization and in rehab. So if you go look at the individual pages, again, those bold.
Martin, got a question here, the council.
Okay.
Since this has to be done in 180 days, our rehab list, the income guidelines have knocked out a whole bunch of folks that were on that waiting list. Are we going to modify those guidelines so that we can actually get this money out? Or you anticipate that we've got 183 on the waiting list?
There should be that many on the waiting list. What you're referring to, I believe, is not making them ineligible. It was prioritizing the list. So we had this list of people, and they're selecting them based on a priority. They're all eligible. It's just that some of them are being selected being on elderly, disabled. And so what they'll do now is with their existing funding is fund all of the elderly, disabled people. And now, I think David's saying that they'll now go back to the rest of the list now and start funding some of the other priority people, the other income people.
And are we going to have problems with the environmental and getting enough of that stuff done so that we could actually let 180 new contracts out?
David assures me that
He's
he's
raised his hand.
unprofitable.
David's got his hand raised.
David, yeah.
We've got 97 that's ready to go, ready to be bid. We've got 55 more that all they need is environmentals. And that leaves 31 that's needs a little of this or a little of that. But no, the environmentals is not going to be a problem.
Well, okay, but can I continue?
Sure.
But we were expecting to do some of those without this money.
Right.
So, I mean,
Business is good. We got plenty of.
well, you're at 150.
We got 100. We got more than that. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, 150 ready to go, pretty much.
And then we've got our regular money that probably would have covered most of that 150, correct?
No.
How many?
These are on top of the ones that we've already scheduled to do with the existing
Okay,
money.
so this is above and beyond what our normal spending pattern was.
Yeah.
And to your other question a while ago on will we need more, we're projecting in the FY09 fund, which won't be available until October 1 of this year. That's when, at some point in time, we will go to a different priority, the second level, which I think is families whose incomes are less than 50% of the national median income. So we will went past the elderly, handicapped, disabled, the lower incomes, and go to the second priority.
Thank you.
Councilor Christian Hawk.
Could I just follow up this briefly?
Okay, go ahead.
In general, we, in looking at what we were going to fund, it was made clear you have to continue your existing funding. This is on top of that you have to do both, and you have to do both in the time frame set. So.
Ms. Fisher.
On this 2D, it's to rehabilitate or replace 218 houses. I want to know right now, since it's 6 months into the year, how many of these have we already done?
I'd have to do to count. I don't have a.
Hopefully we've done 110 of them.
Well, that includes rehabs, all the emergencies that we're doing out of the hospital and all those. I can have you count this afternoon before the council meeting, but I don't have one.
Okay, could you send it to us? Because I'm wondering if we can get them done.
I'll have that information.
Councilor Jordan.
Just if I could.
Go ahead.
Right now, out of the 2008 Indian Housing Plan, they got 3.9 million left. So they've got a lot of money and a lot of those units with existing money to get done between now and the end of the fiscal year.
Councilor Jordan.
Are these 218 homes on 2D and the additional 183 homes, they're not going to be done inside the organization, is that right? They're going to be contracted out?
The stimulus money is primarily all contracting out. And I believe in the budget, David's budget that you'll see in E&F has around 4.4 million in contracts. So most of that money, almost all of that money, will be contracted out. With the existing money from the 2008 Indian Housing Plan, they're doing a mix of contracting and so-called force account, where the tribal workforce is doing some of those. But the stimulus money for both the rehab and the modernization will be contracted out almost entirely.
And this, just to have full, this question is directed towards David. David, do you have anybody over rehab now? Or is that the position you're trying to fill?
No, that's Sharon Ray and David Pruitt.
Okay.
I don't have any positions as far as I know that I'm trying to fill.
Okay.
Councilor Cox.
Just a question about the Delaware money, and Secretary of State may want to chime in on this. Depending on how things go with that agreement up in Washington, what happens to that 215? Is it just automatically, assuming they receive federal recognition the way it's been written up, do we just automatically move that to an account to them, or how does that work?
It would not change our relationship on housing. We currently have a sub-recipient agreement where they can proceed with their housing activities, and we are flowing through the money to the Delaware. So should they go through the secretarial election and regain federal recognition, it wouldn't change any of that. We still do have all of this money available to them to do for the same activities.
Okay, but it would go to them. I guess that's ultimately my question. The next go around, when we're approving all this, will we see that 215, or will they automatically?
We'll still pass through the nation. That's our agreement.
That's what I want to make sure of. Thank you.
I think, if I could follow up on that, I think that this money is intended for the Housing Authority of the Delaware Tribe because of the units they own, and HUD will require it to be granted from us, so it has to come to us for this Nahalsta money.
Thank you. Good.
Councilor Thorne.
Would, or could, this funding be used for someone that's building their own home? Could it be used for materials only?
It's not intended to. If your question is, could it be, I guess in theory it could be. It probably wouldn't meet the intent of the stimulus law as far as employing people. We didn't put any construction money in there because we think we have sufficient money, probably in the neighborhood of $6 million or so, of self-help money, and didn't want to add to any more money in there.
Do we have any kind of a program that could help someone with materials only to build a home?
Essentially, the building package program is in fact that kind of program. The so-called SIP, which you often refer to as a SIP program, but the building package program is providing materials for people to build their own houses.
If we've got a person that has a home that's 3/4 the way done and needs some materials to finish it, can they apply for that money?
It's not the way the program's written. You could, I mean, under Nahalsta, but I don't believe that we have an existing program that covers that kind of situation. Other than we have, I think we still have the limited tribal fund, and that's only the $1,000 type of funding. But for any significant amount of funding like that, we currently don't have anything that fits that, I don't believe.
What would we have to go into to change that?
You could look at the self-help building program and actually change its requirements. That contemplates building houses from the whole amount of the funding, but you can certainly, that program could be changed to do that.
There isn't any of this funding could be used for self-help?
In theory, it could be. Our belief is that we already have in our current Indian housing plans enough money for self-help. And the ideal of the stimulus money is to create jobs. And so that's why most of the funding in here is being contracted out.
Thank you.
Councilor Coburn.
Okay, I have a question. A lot of the people in Swift County have Cherokee housing that was built several years ago. And they've had repairs done by the Housing Authority. They've used up all their equity and they need things done. Can any of this money be used to help them? Or say, for instance, an elderly couple that their home is paid out. It's paid off. I get a lot of those questions. They want me to come look at their house and they say they have no equity left and they need things. Can any of it be used for that?
Okay, that's two different situations. The answer to both is yes, but in the first case of existing mutual help houses, there's not money. It can be used for that purpose, but it's not intended to, or what is being proposed here, although I know David has been looking at the possibility of including in our regular Indian housing plan money some work for existing mutual help houses for elderly people and disabled people. And so I think that he's looking at that possibility of using this money mainly for the so-called low rent but that that might free up some future money in our regular Indian housing plans to address, some of those. The second situation, when you said if they're paid off, that means they may formerly have been mutual help units. Now they're paid off. Now, in effect, what they are privately owned units. And the rehab money in here can be used for those paid off units because they're treated just like any unit then. They're not treated like mutual help units at that point.
Councilor Baker.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. The first one is on the Delaware issue. Are they aware of the guidelines and the rules, and are they putting together a plan like this that will meet the federal guidelines for those dollars?
Well, I sure hope so.
Well, I mean, if you made them aware of it.
David, the amount that's in the Indian housing plan was done at their instruction as to what they wanted to use the money for. We've stressed to them they have significant amounts of other money from other Indian housing plans that they're not using. So it's a good point, it's a legitimate point, and we need to be able to spend not just our $11.7 million, but that $215,000 too. They're having significant trouble spending the money that they have access to.
But I mean, I would think that we need to take the time to make them understand that it has to be, spent in 180 days and yada, yada.
Yeah, they know that. They've, in fact, attended some of the same meetings we have.
Okay.
And
That's on that.
we'll probably, we may want to enter into an MOA of some special provision to highlight that, though, that we want this money spent in addition, again, just like we're telling David, it's in addition, not instead of the money that we currently have out there.
All right, then the second speaks to David's point. It's a problem that we've had for quite some time that probably needs to be addressed. We've had this $1,000 self-help materials only for, I'm going to say, 10 years. And 10 years ago, $1,000 meant a whole lot more than $1,000 does today. I mean, it buys a third the shingles that it bought 10 years ago, if not less than that. You can't, shingle a house now for $1,000. And 10 years ago, we had a $5,000 emergency housing that was not restricted to just elderly and handicapped. And so some of these single mamas and folks we were able to go out to their house and do $5,000 emergency and send our folks out, and that's not happening. And I think this body really needs to think about this $1,000 materials only, bumping it up to $3,000 to $5,000 so that they can get their brother-in-law and their cousin, and they can come in and put a roof on their house and keep it from rotting down around their ears. And we really need to think about that. I'm not prepared to make a motion at this time, but I would wish everybody would think really hard about reviving that program and putting enough money in it so that if a couple is within $7,000 or $8,000 of finishing their house, then maybe they could apply for our $5,000 materials only, and might be able to get there. Thank you.
And that probably can be addressed to people other than me, the tribal funded programs, which is what those are. So.
I understand.
Yes. Marvin, the priorities be given to projects that can be spent in 180 days. But we have up to a year to commit the money, and then half of it has to be spent within 2 years. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so it doesn't all have to be spent within 180 days.
Yeah, the 180 days is that we have to have it and HUD terms obligated, that means under contract, and then the contract, then the actual, none of it has to be spent within 180 days, just obligated. And so at that point, probably October 1 begins the expenditure of the money.
Actually, it says it should be obligated within that 1 year,
Yeah.
with priority given to those projects.
Right, that's correct, yeah, that's correct. The way that we're viewing it is, we want it to be obligated within the 180 days, and aren't even looking at the additional time period, that's kind of our own internal way that we're looking at it, to try to get the money out there. And one of the reasons that we're doing that is we're wanting to be able to commit to being able to obligate the money within the 180 days is because we think that when the competitive portion comes around, if we can say that we're going to definitely obligate all of our formula money within the 180 days, that will strengthen our competitive proposal. That we won't have a whole bunch of money sitting around that is not up to the point of being obligated or expended. That's kind of our ideal in doing that. Essentially, the plan calls for, it's not exactly equal, but it basically takes half of the money and puts it into rehab, half of the money and puts it into the modernization of our existing low rent units, as well as the roads for the mutual health projects that we talked about earlier, and some other utility upgrades to mutual health projects and low rent projects. In addition, for the low rent units, it does things as insulation, new windows, that sort of thing. David can provide a lot more detail if you want details on what we would be proposing to expend out of the modernization funds. The rehab money is rehabbing privately owned units again. It's just the standard rehabilitation of houses. So the money consists of those two things and the Delawares. And then there's a little bit of money, you can look at the little bit of money that's being put into administration on page 14, little over 220,000 of the 11.9 million is going into administration, which is indirect cost. It's the indirect cost essentially of the salaries of people that's going to be administering the programs.
Councilor Jordan.
I'm going to direct this question to David, if that'd be all right, Marvin.
Sure.
On the 183 houses that you expect to contract out, are we going to do this in small enough increments that our small business owners will be able to bid on such a project?
I haven't met with procurement folks yet, but if we don't, I don't know that we're complying with the stimulus.
Okay.
Because if you bid it out in large chunks, it really narrows who can bid on it. And there's bidders out there that could bid in large chunks, but if we don't divide it up in a way where the smaller folks can do some bidding on it, then I don't think we've done what we're supposed to do.
So right now, David, are you looking at then encouraging the procurement people to bid that out in small amounts?
Smaller houses. I mean, we can't do individually, but 3 or maybe, something like that. But we can also, if we have a need to bid out 8 at a time, I think that we can get those covered. We can get some covered with 1 or 2. But yeah, I agree with you. We can't do them. Here's 97 houses. Who's going to bid them?
Because there'll only be one person or 2 people that might be able to do that. But if we can get it down to small amounts, 2 or 3 at a time, or 3 or 4 at a time, then we're going to give everybody in the communities a chance to bid on it. And that will create jobs.
ahead, Mark.
This is not necessarily related to stimulus, but we're going to see if we can do this. There's been a revision to NAHOSTA when it was reauthorized last fall that allows tribal preference now in employment and training, employment, contracting and training. And we're going to see, working on a policy to try to get a Cherokee Nation citizen preference in place to try to, to create some jobs and contract with Cherokee Nation citizens.
I still have the
Go
floor.
ahead, yes.
So what you're saying, Marvin, is we're going to try to give our Cherokee men a chance to bid on these and give them a little
And
credit.
a few women, maybe.
Well,
No.
yeah, I don't know, I may be able to find some women that will do some bidding.
Yeah,
But we're going to
exactly.
try to give our people preference.
Exactly. That's correct.
And I'm glad to hear that, Marvin, because I just was talking to a person, and I didn't know this, that even within our Taro businesses throughout Indian country, that the Chickasaws has preference until you bid a job over in Chickasaw. I've even found out that a lot of the states have preferences. If you're building a job in Texas, those Texas contractors have preference. If you're building a job in Arkansas, those Arkansas contractors have preference. So I'm glad to hear this is going into knowledge, and that this women will take us a step further as we get into our more terrible law. But I have Councilor Watt and then Councilor Thorne.
Thank you, Chairman Buzzer. Will Section 3 apply?
Section 3 applies.
What are we doing to comply with that?
Section 3, for those of you, in most funding, you're not supposed to have a geographical preference in federal funding anyway. Section 3 is a geographical preference specific only to HUD funding that allows you to direct funding to the low-income people in the area and where you're spending money. So, for example, if we're spending money in the Cherokee area, we can have a geographical preference and give preference to people living in the area. Or we have to. I shouldn't say we should. We have to give preference, and that's the so-called Section 3 of the HUD Act of 1968, which directs funding to those low-income people where the funding is being expended. It's a law that is, I'll say it's secondary to Indian preference. You don't go serve non-Indians in an area above Indians who may be high income in an area or in or out of an area. So Indian preference overrides Section 3 always if it's between Indians and non-Indians. With the NAHOSTA provision, tribal or Cherokee citizen preference would override Indian preference and make other Indians secondary, and then the Section 3 would be below that.
Councilor Conley.
Just as a follow-up, so is Taro the one that's going to help us comply with this part, or how does that work? Who's responsible for that?
Well, for NAHOSTA piece, I think Taro or Career Services Taro office has been assigned some responsibility. Actually has a NAHOSTA budget for what is termed Section 3 compliance. They still have their full budget. I think it would be 3560884 is the accounting unit, where we specifically have set aside some money for Section 3 compliance, so they would be the ones handling it.
Councilor Thorne.
Marvin, on the rehab side and the new construction side of this, or heavy new constructions, will any of this funding cover utilities, wells, water lines, meters?
On the rehab side, it could. If it's an on site, let's say a well's gone bad and that kind of thing, that is an item that can be covered by rehab. I don't know to what extent that they run into those situations. I'm sure they do, and David can answer that, but yes, it is an eligible item under rehab.
Go ahead, Marty. Are you going to cover the competitive side?
I can if we want to go into that.
Well, I think we need to move on because we've got about 12, 14 more minutes, and I'd like to get the questions called here. I think we've asked a lot of questions today. Yes, Ms. Jordan?
I make a motion that we go ahead and pass.
Second. I have a motion to pass and a motion to second. Any discussion? Councilor Cobb?
Are we moving this to council? Is that part of the motion?
I'm going to ask for that. You're going to make that part of the motion. If we move it to full council tonight, I think first it'll have to go to executive and finance to do that, so we're going to put those in form of a motion. Okay, Ms. Jones.
I don't know how you are going to do it this time, but our Indian housing plans have normally gone directly from committee to council.
Okay.
And we have 3 budgets that implement this R and E and F, so however you want
we'll do that. And we'll make her motion, and if it's okay, Ms. Jordan, to approve this resolution, then in your motion to send it to full council. But I had a question from Mr. Thorne. Did you have a comment? Okay. All right, the motion is to approve this resolution with it going to full council tonight. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, same sign. Thank you, Ms. Jordan. We've got a few more minutes here. If any more questions for Mr. Jones, I'd entertain those. If not, then do I hear a motion to recess? Adjourn.
Did you want to mention the competitive fund?
Let's do that. Yeah, I think that'd be interesting. So we've got about 10 more minutes for it.
Okay. Just real quickly, we don't have much information on it yet, but it'll be a $240 million, a little over $240 million available for competitive funding. We understand that it may be a nationwide competition of everybody eligible for, if you receive formula money, you're eligible to submit a proposal for this additional funding. It says, and you can look at the law there, it narrows down what you can apply for even further. It says to stimulate construction and rehabilitation. So now we've narrowed it down to all the things. The formula funding was narrowed down to about 5 items. Now we narrow it down to a couple of items, meaning construction and rehabilitation.
Have we got some of those in mind, Mark?
We're looking at, if you'll recall, over a year ago, we put some money into purchasing some land, and they're getting ready to close on a couple of tracts, one over in Adair County, one in Sequoia County, in which we may submit a proposal to construct new houses on those particular sites. That's one idea. There may be, we don't have the rules yet. Again, how many can you submit multiple projects? Perhaps we can submit $240 million worth of projects. We just don't know at that point. But that's the one that we're looking at right now to fit the criteria for. Of course, we've got so much money right now in rehab, and some of your questions were about, can we really get that spent, which is kind of the way we look at it too. Maybe we can't do much more rehab, but we may have to look at the construction.
Just a suggestion, and I don't know, this may have to come under the houses for water, but I certainly would like us to look at any housing developments that we have that need an upgrade in the water system. And one comes to mind real quick is the Kenwood Stanwood standpipe. That thing needs to be redone, and it's probably a $100,000 project right there. So if we could get some of those things done, we may conserve some of our money on the water side if that's available. I think.
Yeah.
And bridge, yes.
We have some, again, back to the formula money. The modernization money can improve mutual health low rent projects. Just depends on how eventually the Housing Services Group prioritizes all of the different things that it can do with that, the roads improvement, the low rent improvements, mutual help improvements such as what you're talking about can certainly come out of that money. And we'll look at it to see if we can get it into a competitive proposal too.
Well, I would suggest to the committee and to the councils, if you have something in mind, email them to Marvin or David, and you know, I think we'd all work together on this stuff. We can certainly come up with some competitive grants here, so.
Yeah, if you send something, make sure you send it to both of us. So.
Sure.
So, he doesn't communicate very well sometimes.
Okay.
That's exactly what he says.
Ms. Calhoun,
Is there any chance at all that somehow new PACE facilities could somehow fit in that, or because it's not housing per se, it would be covered? Maybe a combination senior housing plus PACE?
There's some proposals of that sort. I don't recall PACE being mentioned, but we can certainly, you know, take a look at it and see. Normally, in order to fit within the hostel, it's got to be housing where someone stays there overnight. You know, whether it's a rental unit, transitional unit, stuff like that. But we can certainly take a look at it. And I know it's being considered. I know that's not the discussion here, but I know it's being considered for the ICDBG application tomorrow, a PACE facility, and also coming up, and I guess I'll be coordinating this too, will be the ICDBG stimulus fund, and it'll be a competitive piece. So they'll be looking for some projects to apply for that money too. But that isn't out there, but that may be a better possibility for PACE type of fund than I would think, but I'll certainly take a look at it.
Thank you.
okay, thank you, Marvin. Anything else you want to tell us, Marvin, or is that wrap you up?
No, although I know we had talked about a subcommittee meeting at some point here, and I
Yes,
think
sir.
there's plenty of issues.
Let me go ahead and try to get that worked out. What I'd like to do in our subcommittee is have probably David Sutherland and probably you, Marvin, if you want to get involved with us, and also people from the environmental side of the programs to come over and talk about some of the environmental issues. I'm not sure how to put this other than it seems to slow some of our stuff down. Well, let me put it this way. Some of them seem to be issues that we shouldn't have to deal with. And I'll just give you an example. Some guys that come to me and said, if we're changing that door over there, we can change the door, but we can't change the frame or the trim that goes around the door because of the environmental issue. But to me, that doesn't seem to make sense to me. It's not common sense. The other thing is real quick, and let me just give you this example, is they can change the inside of a stool, they can change the seat, and I believe even the bow back, but they can't change and put a whole new stool in there. So to me, that's common sense tells you that something ought to be worked out like that. So that's what I'd like to do in the subcommittee, David and Marvin, if you could get a hold of the people from environmental and the next subcommittee we have is just discuss those issues and see if we can do some eliminating of those environmental stuff. You know, sometimes you can get exceptions to them. Anyway, pick them around, and then David, if you would, is bring a list, and I'm sure the housing has a list of what they can and can't do, and as far as how it's going with the environment, let us take a look at it. I don't know if there's anything we can do with it, but I think anything we can do to speed services up to our folks, you know, that's what we want to do, and that's what I'd like to discuss.
Yeah, and we need for sure to have Tom Elkins here so that they can explain, you know, why that they're doing things in a certain way too. I would mention, we're just getting used to the word stimulus, but the omnibus bill passed here a few days ago, and that increased Nahasta funding for the 2009 Indian Housing Plan, which we recently passed, and we expect to get additional money for the 2009 Indian Housing Plan, so we'll be needing to revise that plan. Actually, we'll be needing to revise this 2008 IHP because we got some additional earmarked funds too. So in the near future, we'll be bringing some of those things forward too.
And that's exactly the reason, Marvin, that this is going on to the 2008 housing plan because the 09 dollars aren't here yet.
That's right. It hadn't even Now, until the omnibus passed, there wasn't any federal appropriation for the full fiscal year.
Okay, thank you, and we'll get back to you on the subcommittee at the time and date on the thing, but we'll hear a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor, say aye. Any opposed, same sign. Thanks, everybody, for coming.
He said he'd work with
Even on the steps.